Hey, everybody, Max Boltman here alongside Mark Lazarus for another episode of the Athletic Hockey Show. And we are joined today by Eric Stevens, who, frankly, has the news of the day here. Adrian Kempe signing the 8-year, $85 million extension with the Kings, Eric. A huge move for LA.
Yeah, it's funny how teams tend to do this on their off day, their quote-unquote off day, in between games. And it tends to be the time when they get their business done. But yeah, no, you're right, Max. This is big for them. And he's a guy that they had to sign. To be frank, they're obviously a competitive club. They're a win now club, even though they haven't won enough. But that's how they're built. And frankly, they don't have, the prospects in their system. They don't have someone that they can just readily look at and say, okay, well, we can maybe part with him because this guy, prospect X is our future. He's our future top line right wing or whatsoever. No, Adrian Kempe is their guy right now. He's their best player. And I think actually for what wound up to be the amount, the $85 million over 8 years, what the number came in at, I think it's actually something that is going to be fairly agreeable for both sides. It's probably a little bit more than what the LA imagined initially, but we see what the salary cap is going, and we see what high level, elite level, or top level at least right wings get, and so to at least get them underneath 11 and under what they're paying for Drew Doughty, I think they managed to do okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if Adrian Kempe had made it to the summer, he would have been the belle of the ball, and he would have gotten a lot more than $10.6 million a year. That said, he might not even be a $10.6 million winger. He's a great player. Don't get me wrong. He's a game-changing player, but he's on pace for like 25 goals this year. He's not exactly tearing up. He had a 40-goal season a few years ago. He is a very, very good, 80-point player, I would say, on average, in a league that's full of 100-point guys now. So is this an overpay? Is this an underpay? Or like you said, is this like right on target?
Laz, he's a fascinating case because of some of those things that you allude to. Because you're right. If you compare him to, say, other quote unquote top wingers, career highs of 41 goals, 73 points, in some ways they sort of don't measure up to who we think are the top forwards in the league, the top wingers, top scorers in the league. I think what that though illustrates is like I said, what the going rate is for a top line right wing, a top line scorer, A, and then B, his meaning to the Kings. He's their best player. He is massively important for them. And so I think that also really increased his value. It would be different, say if he had lesser numbers, or say if he was maybe the second or third best player on the Kings team. No, he's the best guy right now. And they don't have, say, no one necessarily really waiting in the wings, it's like Quentin Byfield, maybe, but he's a center, and he's probably going to be their first line center. He's sort of a different animal. So yeah, I think it's a combination of the two. I think, the fact that he came up for his deal right now at this very time with the cap number jumping as it is was perfect for him. But you're right. It's a fascinating thing. Yeah, in terms of him, he's not necessarily what you think of as a 10, near 11 million type guy, but maybe for the Kings, he is that.
Dom's model has him at a $9.3 million market value, Laz. So that's to your second point. But really, I think the key's in the first thing you said. If he makes it to market, he's the belle of the ball. That gives him all the leverage because there really is no one else as good as Adrian Kempe projected to be available on the market. And that, to me, gave the Kings two choices. Are you going to trade him and rebuild when Anze Kopitar retires? Or are you going to sign him and stay competitive? And from that lens, I don't think it was much of a choice at all. I think they had to do this because there's just no way to replace him. I mean, that's kind of the other side to this angle, Laz, is like, What is the free agent class going to look like next summer? What is the free agent class going to look like for the next 4 summers?
Oh my God. I remember just a couple of years ago, we were talking about the 2026, you and I cover teams that are in these long rebuilds, Detroit and Chicago. And we're like, 2026 this summer, that's when you'll be able to expand. That's when you'll be able to get your Marian Hossa. That's when you'll be able to get your supercharged free agent. And, Jack Eichel, Kirill Kaprizov, Connor McDavid, Kyle Connor, Marty Necas, Adrian Kempe. Now it's what? Alex Tuck, an aging Artemi Panarin, Rasmus Anderson? Like, how are you supposed to get better in this league? Now, this is the irony of, like, for years and years and years, so many teams lost their best players because of a flat salary cap for the last, even not even flat before COVID. Year after year, contenders would have to shed salaries. Now everyone gets to keep their players. That's great. But now, if you're not already great, you're screwed. Unless you're going to be able to develop completely from within. Every year now, we're going to find a weak free agent market. Guys aren't going to make it to free agency. Your Mitch Marners are going to be the exceptions, not the rules now.
Yeah, I think about the teams that are coming out of, their rebuilds right now, are starting to or wanting to, right? Chicago would be one of them. Eric, you cover another one in San Jose, right? Like, the Sharks have drafted really well. I'm sure they were hoping to have a nice free agent prize at the end of all this too, and it just may not be available for them. They may have to do this almost entirely internally or via trade.
Yeah, you know what? It's a great point, because I think there were some quiet rumblings, even dating back to when Leon Draisaitl was, at least coming up for his deal or in line, and there were the possible connections. Well, because Hasselplattner is a German owner, and, maybe they could kind of start building up a contingent there, and they'd have all this money available. And, no, you're right. I mean, yeah, what good is having, a ton of money if there's not going to be anybody out there that, in terms of at least a game changing type of free agent. I guess, in their case, they'll just throw 14, 15 million at Macklin Celebrini and make sure he's locked up until the end of time.
But I'm sure they want to support him with and surround him with, like, good veterans and right as they're coming out. So it's a tricky situation to be in.
This is going to wind up, I think, benefiting the middle class of the NHL, which was almost dying, right? Because some of these teams have to get to the cap floor. Like a Chicago, again, next year, like these guys, Bedard's next contract won't be kicking. Well, it'll be kicking in next year, but a lot of these guys aren't going to be able after that. And when they start moving some of their older veterans that have been these stopgaps, they're going to have to throw money at somebody just to get to the cap floor, these non-cap teams. And you're going to see a lot of guys getting $8 million that you thought were $5 million players, because that money has to go somewhere. That's great. I got no problem with that. Power to the players. But it's not as easy as it used to be. You used to be able to say, we're going to go out and get our big free agent in 2029. Yeah, you're probably not. That's just not how it's going to work anymore.
Yeah.
What are your second line wingers making right now? You're right. Your second line wingers are going to be 7, 8, maybe, a little bit north of that now. And so your third liners are going to wind up making about 5 or so. And maybe people will be good with that, with the big bump in the cap, but that's going to be the reality, as you alluded to.
And there are teams, and the Red Wings might be one of them, that got some really good deals done right before this. And I'm sure that a year ago they were thinking, Lucas Raymond at $8 million, Moritz Seider at $8.5 million. These are going to age amazing. We're going to have so much space to push in for a guy. Now it's like, no, you're just kind of efficient for the sake of being efficient. There's really no one out there that, you got room to extend your own players, and that's the win, is you can keep everybody. But there's really not that bell of the ball.
Drafting is becoming a lot more important than general managing, as it were. Like, your scouting team is almost more important than your roster building at this point.
Yeah, the amateur scouting is defining, I think, for franchises. Let's zoom out here to talk about the Pacific as a whole, Eric, because earlier this week, there was a point a few days ago where it was on top LA, Anaheim, San Jose. I was petitioning to rename it the Stevens Division. I haven't heard back yet from the NHL on that one, but we'll see how that shakes out. But still, the Kings and the Ducks on top there. I don't think people would have been floored to see the Kings there. The Ducks obviously have been one of the better stories of the year as well. But talk to us about, like, how the Kings have done this, because they're an interesting team. They're not, like, going along playing fire wagon hockey here.
No, and they're not their style either. And you know what? I'm with you, Max, in terms of, like, over the first few weeks, as they kind of bumbled about here. They kind of got off to a slow start. They managed to get into overtimes and pick up points here and there, but I didn't know really what their identity was. Whereas before they were clearly one where they were defense focused,
heavy,
and they still are, and they've gotten back to that. I think recently during this surge, especially during the road, you're seeing more Kings like hockey. I mean, Saturday was the picture perfect example, a 1-0 win in Ottawa, where there was no time or space for anybody. I mean, that was not a Picasso that we saw. they're being played, but that was actually more like what the Kings want to win. That's how they want to win. That's how they are. It's almost part of their ethos to check first, check second, check third, and then create. But no, they're getting some solid goaltending. Darcy Kemper has been steady. I mean, I think he's proven over the past year plus now that he's going to be in the Team Canada goaltending mix. So there is that. It's just the team. It's a solid team that they're not going to get in the track meets with others. They want to keep the scores down and be opportunistic when they have to, other than Kempe that we've talked about, and the retiring Kopitar and Drew Doughty. It's just kind of a group of, I won't say anonymous guys, but just kind of a group of hardworking guys, that play responsible hockey. And it's not exciting, but they've been able to scratch out wins, particularly on the road, which is kind of a total flip-flop from last year, actually.
We're at the point of the year where I actually start paying attention to the numbers, right? I start believing the numbers, right? I start looking for trends. And the Kings are baffling me because they're the usual Kings, right? They're top 5 in goals against per 60. They're top 5 in attempts against per 60. They're top 5 in scoring chances against per 60. But they are in the bottom 5 in high danger chances against per 60. That's a really strange stat. Is there something? Did that all happen in one game? How do you explain that stat? Because I don't understand how the math even works on a stat like that.
Yeah, you know what? I could, numbers wise, I couldn't explain it as well. The way I see it, the way I explain it is, I think it's just indicative of the changes that they made, that they had to make, kind of in the off season. They had to replace Vladislav Gavrikov, and I think some of that reflects that in terms of those high danger chances against, because. Look, he was terrific for them. He was their best defenseman last year, and he obviously parlayed that into a big-time deal with the New York Rangers. But in doing that, and the holes that were created and they filled with Brian Dumoulin and Cody Ceci, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that, they replace what Vladislav Gavrikov and Jordan Spence gave them on the back end. They're kind of different types of players. And those two that I mentioned, they struggled at the very beginning. In fact, they had them as a pair. They were really bad in the first few games. They split them up, had one playing with Doughty, had the other playing with Mikey Anderson. Now they've kind of reunited them because I think it took them, those veterans, some time to kind of get used to the system, kind of get used to the way the Kings did things. And so they've been better of late. But I think a lot of that particularly was early on, over this last stretch, and particularly over this road trip that they've had. They've cut a lot of that down.
Our friends at BetMGM have the Kings with the third best odds to win the Pacific Division at plus 475. It's behind Vegas plus 115, Oilers plus 260. Eric, I don't know how much you dabble in odds or anything like that, but does that sound about right to you? Too high, too low?
I would say that's a little too high. Yeah. I'm still not sold on them. Per se, I think there's still a lot of the element of the Kings are who they are, to them. And I still see Edmonton getting their stuff together, even with all the issues that they have. And Vegas, they're down in the standings a little bit right now, but I think that's more of a function of they just haven't played as many games as, either LA or Anaheim or those that are above them. So eventually the cream, I think, is going to rise to the top, and I think LA will kind of settle into the spot that I've seen them and that they've been in, which is they're probably going to either play for third in the Pacific, or a wild card spot.
All right. I need to ask you about Anaheim. You're the Ducks guy. You hired Joel Quenneville. You expect this team to become a possession monster. And they're certainly scoring a lot more than they were last year, but they're actually kind of terrible defensively. They're giving up more scoring chances per hour in the league than last year, and they were the worst team in the league at that last year. how sustainable is what they're doing? Like, they have so much talent, so much excitement, and so much skill and speed. Like, it's fun to watch them. They've got Lucas Dostal, who's playing very well. That .903 save percentage might not look that good, but it's great behind that defense because his goal saved above expected is terrific. It's like 11. How sustainable is what Anaheim is doing? Because all the underlying numbers say the bottom's going to fall out of this, but when you watch them, you're like, nah, this is legit. These guys are for real.
Yeah, Laz, there's two ways I see to look at the Ducks right now. And it's almost like they've got one part of their game together, which is the offensive side of it. These young guys all kind of coming together all at once here and sort of exploding, with Leo Carlson and Cutter Gauthier kind of at the top of that. So you have that one part of that side of them that's kind of come together here. And then you have that the other side that still, I think, is in construction here, which is that defensive element of it. I know that they're still adjusting to, Joel's, maybe more zone defensive system where they've been playing strictly man to man over the last few years, which I don't think was, geared, quite frankly, to what the personnel that they had on the back end. So I think there's a little bit of that going on. Some of it's, going to be mindset. I mean, Laz, you've seen it. I mean, they've been terrible defensively for years. Okay. Even before last year, they had some of the worst defensive metrics of the entire salary cap era. It was almost embarrassing how many, grade A chances they would give up per period, much less per game. So it's incrementally, I think it's incrementally gotten better in some ways. And I think there's room to grow. And so, yeah, the sustainable part, you could say, no, it's not sustainable. You can't win 6-5 track meets every night. And there's a part of them that has been willing to engage in that. And I think Joel, I think he knows this. He even said earlier to me, earlier this year that they're willing to trade scoring chances. It's where those scoring chances are located, that he's more concerned with. But I think that there is a path for them to get better, though. And so I think that that's where it can be sustainable. If you watch them from night to night, though, they're competing with everyone. And yes, they're not going to score 4, 5, 6 goals every single night. But the talent that they have on that team, the way that it's been put together, the young guys that are exploding right now, some of the veterans that have been renewed. I mean, Chris Kreider and even Jacob Trua, they've played very well on the outset. And they played beyond what I think most people have expected right out of the gate. So that's helped them, certainly. But if they want to, though, be serious, if they, this is a year where I think they're sort of playing with house money right now, just right this moment. I don't, they were looking to be in that playoff mix. So right now they're ahead of schedule. But I think if they want to be serious, if they're going to think that they can seriously do something this year, yeah, they've obviously got to get better on that defensive side of the puck and at least, not make it to where Lucas Dostal is having to make 10 bell saves every other shift.
One last thing I wanted to get you on with the Ducks, Eric. We've talked about Leo Carlson on the show. He's having a fantastic year, breakout, one of the best stories in the league so far. A couple other young guys, though, for the Ducks who have really stood out and maybe even surpassed, like where I think surpassed where we thought they would both be. Cutter Gauthier, who's got the 12 goals and 21 points in his first 18 games, and 19-year-old Beckett Sennecke, not looking maybe on occasion, but a lot of the time not looking 19. He's been really productive, 6 goals, 6 assists in 18 games. More impressed by Gauthier at age, I think he's 22 now, or Sennecke at 19?
Good question. I'm more impressed with Sennecke, if you frame it that way. Because I didn't see him. I saw him maybe contending for a spot on the roster. I saw him getting his 9 games. And then, okay, we're going to decide, what are we going to do with him? Are we going to keep him around? Are we going to keep him up to the World Juniors, et cetera, whatsoever? I did not see him grabbing a top 6 spot and producing the way he has right now. And to your point, Max, you're right. There are times and periods where he definitely looks like a 19-year-old player
Yeah.
playing his first few games in the NHL. Whether it's defensively, maybe taking some, ill-advised penalties. You can see where that's popped up, but you can also see the skill that he has. He kind of started to remind me of a young Corey Perry in the sense that he's kind of long and lanky. He has no fear in going to the net, and I don't know if he has necessarily that want and will to just be a nuisance to every single goaltender that's out there. But he's not shy about going to the net and mixing it up, and maybe taking a little bit of punishment as well in order to kind of announce his presence there around the crease. He's got great hands. He's got a great shot, and there's a lot of young Corey Perry that I see in him.
And I said Gauthier was 22. He's 21. So I guess he's 2 years older than Sennecke. They'll both turn 1 more year older in January. But yeah, I mean, when the Ducks were here, and frankly, when I was in Anaheim earlier this month, I number of times I checked my sheet to just go, who's 45? Like it was enough to tell me that, oh, this kid's like making an impact on the game. So really impressive stuff from Beckett Sennecke, one of many Ducks doing great things to begin this season. Let's take a quick break right there. We're going to be right back with Shayna Goldman to talk Jack Hughes, the Devils, and more. All right, we are back, and we are joined now by Shayna Goldman. And Shayna, let's get into this first, because last week on the show, Laz posed a question as to which Metro team you felt the most confident in. And I think, Laz, your resounding answer was the Devils. But obviously, that is a very different outlook now that we've got a injury to Jack Hughes, a freak accident that is it's going to sideline him for potentially 6 to 8 weeks here. And so I want to know from your perspective, we'll get to Laz in a second, but Shayna, like, what does this do to the Devils, and how do they survive a loss to, I mean, it's not the first time Jack Hughes has been out, but it's the most important player on the Devils.
Yeah, I had some concerns before this injury because, like, you look at the Devils, once Brett Pesce got hurt, and their defensive game started getting a little sketchy there, and it felt like the goaltending hasn't always been perfect this year. It's been some ups and downs, and I think Allen helped pick up the pace when Markstrom was hurt, and I think he played better for a minute there too. But that was like the first strike for me, and then you see Nico Hischier, who I thought had an excellent start, like by late October start struggling. So then it was like, oh, like there are some issues below the surface you have to work out. Now you're down Jack Hughes, and it's just devastating because it's not like Hischier's playing at this like unbelievable level like he was most of last year that you could be like, okay, it's fine because you can split him and Brad up and you have a really good top six. And look, Dawson Mercer's playing great. You could try shifting him back to center. He's played in Jack Hughes' place before. I just feel like there's too many things going wrong that now you're losing your best player, that it feels like this is your make or break moment.
That's what I was going to ask. Is Dawson Mercer a 1C kind of player? Can he step into that role even for just a month or two and really kind of take on that mantle? Because that's 22 minutes a night. That's, tons of power play time. That's your driving offensive force. Dawson Mercer might be the second best offensive player on this team, but is he capable of taking on what Hughes takes on every single night?
I'm going to give Just for Brat the second best hat, without Jack Hughes. I feel like he's so underrated, but I would say Mercer can be your 2C, but not your 1C. But it's going to be really interesting because, like, you go back to his rookie season, and it's funny. This was like my first Devils story when I was like covering the Devils for a minute there, was about Dawson Mercer and how well he stepped up in Jack Hughes' place. And like, he legitimately did. And I think he did all the little things right. He was doing the big things right. He was scoring goals. He was driving play. He was doing everything they needed and more. And then they've had him shift back to that role, this season afterwards, and it just didn't work. And then you look at last year, not only is he on the third line, but he can't even shake it as the 3C for really the last 2 seasons. So he's finally back on track, but he's back on track now as a winger in the top 6, which is where he belongs. So now you're asking him to not just shift back to center, but, replace the MVP of this team. Like, it's a huge ask. I think the fact that he's coming into it confident is a good thing. The fact that he has, a past of doing it, another good thing. But you're going to need someone really good on his wing. Like, I really wonder if they're going to staple Brat to his wing, which they did, if I remember correctly, the first time around when he was a rookie, and see if they can rekindle some of that magic and kind of carry that line.
I find that the teams that succeed when their star player goes out, like, it's usually not because someone comes in and replaces that guy. Like, if Dawson Mercer is coming up in the lineup and trying to do what Jack Hughes does, they're going to lose a lot of games that way. But if Dawson Mercer comes up and plays a Dawson Mercer kind of game, that I think is how you survive this, right? Like, your identity of a team necessarily has to change when you lose a player as good as Jack Hughes, doesn't it?
And this makes your team better when that happens too, right? If guys take on that role in the short term, it makes your team better in the long term, and it'll make this team better equipped for the playoffs if and when they get there. And you look, the good thing for the Devils here is they have the advantage of this great start they've had. They have a big cushion. So many of their so-called competitors in the Eastern Conference are off to these lousy starts. So you don't have to worry about really being lapped by the field here. Like they can muddle through these next 6 to 8 weeks. And when Hughes comes back, the Devils should still be in the thick of it. They're good enough that they should be able to get by, and they have enough of a cushion that they should be able to withstand this, even if it is a big body blow.
Yeah. Like if you can get the whole team clicking now, right? And then Jack Hughes comes, like it all falls into place. But like Max, your point about like Dawson Mercer can't be Jack Hughes is so spot on because they have totally different games, right? Like a big reason the Devils did not trade Dawson Mercer when I felt like he was everyone's trade chip, like, oh, it's a waste of his talents if he's on the wing and he shouldn't be 3C because he's so much better than that. And all of that was true at the beginning of his career, but it's because he brings something different to the lineup than Nico and Jack and Brat too. Like you need someone like Dawson Mercer has that dog in him. He's everything those guys aren't. So he has to do his best right now, and that'll definitely help. But I won't be surprised if they don't look to the trade market. Like if I'm them, I'm looking for someone that could come in and maybe be the 3C when Jack Hughes is healthy and Mercer's back on the wing, ideally. Like that I think could be the move right now, just to like strengthen everything and give yourself a better depth approach because their bottom six isn't perfect still. And I think Cody Glass has been good when he's healthy, but you always have that like when he's healthy tag there too.
Yeah, you're not making the Nazem Kadri push here if you're the New Jersey Devils, right? Yeah, right. All right, so that's the Devils side of this. The other side of this conversation, I think, is about Jack Hughes, and I think obviously this one sounds like it's obviously a non-hockey, it's a freak accident, but this is a player now who's missed or who's played 62 or fewer games in 5 of his first 6 seasons. It sounds like this will be 6 and 7 now, if my math is correct on how many games are in 8 weeks. Is there any concern here about this kind of trend for Jack Hughes, Shayna?
Okay, so when we did player tiers this year, we originally had Jack Hughes as, if I remember right, 1C. And we were asking everybody, do you think he's injury prone? And is that why you'd move him down? And they were like, I would not put that tag on him yet, but I'm still moving him to 2A. Like, I think he needs to, get up there a little bit better. And I get the argument, but it's like when he has a shoulder issue, I think if that becomes a reoccurring theme, and I know he has had multiple shoulder issues now, but if that's the reoccurring theme moving forward, I think you could put that injury prone tag on him. This one, it's a freak accident. It's just like really bad luck. I feel like guys like Stamkos in the past have gotten that injury prone tag too, when it was just like multiple freak things that just have, it's not your fault that these things happen. It's not like, okay, you have a groin issue and every couple weeks it's the same thing. Like someone like Thatcher Demko deserves that tag, but I don't think Jack Hughes is there yet because of this situation. I think if his shoulders don't hold up or his game slows down at all, and it didn't obviously in the first month of action because of that, then you can.
Yeah, I think typically a quote-unquote injury-prone guy is a guy who gets soft tissue injuries. I think of like a Peter Mrazek, who every year would have a groin injury every year. Then you start questioning preparation. You start questioning his training. You start questioning just his body in general. When it's a different kind of injury and it's breaks or it's freak accidents like this. This is. I'm almost amazed this doesn't happen more often. I don't want to make light at all of what happened to Jack Hughes, but we see. These NHL contracts will have like, you're not allowed to go skiing during the season.
Yeah.
And all these clauses to protect, you can't go water skiing. You can't do this. You can't do that. And guys just get hurt. Brian Leetch slipped on the ice outside of his apartment. Corey Crawford fell down the stairs at a concert. Like we all fall down and get hurt. I'm a klutz. It happens to me all the time. It's almost amazing that this doesn't happen more often where serious injuries happen away from the rink just by being a human. We're soft and squishy and very vulnerable, aren't we?
We sure are. And frankly, I don't even think that guys like Mrazek who have the persistent soft, I don't even think it's their fault. I don't think that you can train out of that necessarily, especially once you get to a certain age. But I do think it enters my mind when I think about, the bankable, the best players in the league. Right? Like when we were having that segment last week, you kind of threw out there like Jack Hughes, fringe top 5 player. That to me would be one of the things that keeps him out of it, is to be a top 5 player. For me, I need you playing, maybe it's not 82 games a year, but I need to know I'm getting 70, 75. It's just hard to be in that tier, I think, without that.
Yeah, he's got the talent and the skill and the watchability of a top 5 player, but he has not been able to have that complete 120-point season because he's always missing time. You're absolutely right.
When you get to the top of the league, and this was something we were debating every single player in that top 10 for tier 1, right? It's like when you get to 1C, it was players with nitpicks, but that's Pastrnak and Kaprizov nitpicks. This is now your next level. But when you get to the top of the league, that's what you have to do. You want to talk about the best centers in the world? you have to go through every single detail of their game and be like, okay, their skating is 1% less than the other guy. And you know what? This guy takes more penalties in these big moments, and that it's going to add up. In the grand scheme of things, you don't care. Why would you give a shit if Leon Draisaitl takes a couple extra penalties? He's one of the best players in the world. But when you're going to be comparing him today to Nathan MacKinnon, you're going to be like going through those like nooks and crannies. You have to do it. So yes, this is something that's going to hold him out of that very top of the league. And it's out of his control. But like, sorry, it's a hard league for a reason. There's a reason like Cale Makar didn't win the Norris a couple years ago when he missed 20 games. He was the best defenseman in his minutes. But when you're going head to head with literally the best players in the world, like you have to make some distinction somewhere.
The best ability is availability, right? It's a cliche, but it's true. If you're not there, you're not the best player in the world.
That's right. It's a cliche for a reason. That being said, I think we're all obviously wishing the best for Jack Hughes. We're going to take a quick break right there. We're going to come back and talk about the teams that have us the most worried so far this season. All right, we're back, and we're going to wrap today by talking about the teams that have us the most worried at this point in the season. We're about a month and a half into this, month and a week, so it's early, but we also have a pretty good amount of data, Shayna, on some teams, and I want to get your read on a couple in particular. First, let's start with the team that's in last place. That's the Calgary Flames. 13 points, they're bringing up the rear. It seems like, fire everywhere. I do know the underlying numbers for them are a little more favorable, so can you kind of help us square what to make of the Calgary Flames right now?
Yeah, I mean, listen, they have Dustin Wolf, and that's a huge advantage for them. We saw it last year, right? Like, he was the reason they were anywhere near the playoff picture. I just think the team in front of him is lacking. I think that at the end of the day, that's what it is. They don't generate enough offense. They don't have enough finishing talent, right? Like, it's Nazem Kadri against the world sometimes in Calgary. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement on both ends of the ice, but you look at it at the same time and go, that's okay, because the big picture's in mind. Like, you see the underlying numbers go, well, there's more that they can play up to. And it's like, okay, if they do, they do great. If they don't, whatever. You just don't want to burn out your starting goalie who is going to be your franchise goaltender. That's my like one and only thought with them when I watch them. Like, because it's not even, when you watch the Blues, you go, okay, why aren't you scoring up to expectations? The Flames, I'm like, okay, so you're not. Just don't hurt Dustin Wolf and we'll be fine.
Where would you wishcast Nazem Kadri to? Like, where's the best fit in the league that you see for everyone always needs a 2C, and he's like the quintessential 2C. Where does he fit best right now?
Okay, I would love like a Nazem Kadri sweepstakes because I just think it would be so much fun. Because I feel like the Leafs would be involved and then lose out on him, and I think that would be great.
I don't think they can afford him. I don't know
No.
who they could give up for Nazem Kadri right now.
Nope. I would wonder a little bit about a Montreal. I feel like they could make some sense. I feel like their second line had a lot of scoring pop this year so far, and it's really exciting. But with the new hook injury, I'm like, you know what? They could use a little bit of help. And they're one of those younger teams that I think when you're a young team, you could go way veteran-y, right? And totally screw yourselves. And you think of like the Sabres when they signed like those Okposo deals, like they weren't ready for them in that moment. I think the fact that they took such a measured approach this summer, I think that allows them to go for a veteran now because they went young, as they should, right?
So let's look ahead now. And, you already brought them up, but we always have to ask, how does this affect the Leafs? The Leafs are a tire fire right now. Like, they're not that bad, but in Toronto, it feels like the apocalypse right now. Austin Matthews is hurt. He wasn't scoring at his crazy rate of a couple years ago anyway. Joseph Woll looked good against Chicago Saturday night. That's encouraging because goaltending's been such a step back this year. But what has to be fixed in Toronto? Can this be salvaged?
I mean, everything. I think these are problems at every single level, and I'm not going to be like, oh, wow, I told you so. But I'm sorry, like hiring Brad Treliving, you're kind of getting what you paid for, right? Like, to me, he's not this inventive general manager. And then it was that overall direction to go tougher and grittier. And I understand teams needing that. And when you see the Panthers win back-to-back, I think there's that like push towards it even more. But it's hard skill. It's being tough to play against in a different way. And I just feel like the Leafs went too defensively minded with things instead of, I don't know, the fact that they needed scoring depth when they had 100-point Mitch Marner on their roster. So it feels like this is just a situation of their own making, right? They hired this general manager. I don't think he's done the right thing. He hired this coach who, I'm sorry, I don't think Craig Berube is the coach for a team that needs more scoring when it matters the most. Yes, they need to be more battle tested, but that's not problem A to me, right? And then the roster is flawed, and it's a result of that. And I think guys are underperforming. And you're like, well, who could have predicted this?
Let me push back on that a little bit here because I see your point, right? We all called for years for the Leafs to get stronger, tougher, more defensive. I think for good reason, though. And I think what you're seeing now is not that the Leafs, leaned too far into that identity. It is that they lost Mitch Marner. And yeah, they couldn't afford as much of a supporting cast when they had him and Nylander and Matthews and Tavares because they were all making those huge salaries. That's the league. That's the salary cap. You cannot have this many offensive-minded players, this many point producers, and afford it. I think the issue is not that they overdid it. It's just that they lost Mitch Marner. There's just not anyone out there they could have replaced him with. And so in some ways, it's a mess of their making. They're assetless because of how hard they pushed. I don't have a problem with how hard they pushed. You can quibble with the players they pushed for, right? Now, I did think Scott Laughton was a good fit for them last year. I'm not going to quibble and say that that's worked great. But I do think this is, they did what we all said they should do. And I don't think they were wrong to do it. It just didn't work out. They took the Panthers to 7 games.
Has there been a more catastrophic trade than that Laughton trade? I mean,
it was bad.
He's no better than David Kemp, who they're paying to go away, and they gave up a first rounder to do it.
I'm not defending that like it's a great trade or something. I'm just saying I'm not confused about why they did that. I don't think it was a bad idea from the jump. Shayna, I do think you panned that trade at the time, so you can definitely victory lap that 100%.
No, wait, I'm sorry. They took the Panthers to 7 games is what we heard from so many Leafs fans for months. Like, hang the banner.
I'm not saying hang the banner. I'm saying like they that is how close they were.
Yes,
right.
I will give them that much.
If that goes the other way, they're still without Mitch Marner probably. But
yeah,
it's like that's why they did that. They did that to push the Panthers, and they pushed them harder than anyone else did.
I think if you're going to lean as defensive as they did, right? And like, I'm not faulting getting Chris Tanev and players like that, right? Like that makes sense for them. And I think you see like how Benoit has become a really good defenseman for them. Like those kinds of players, sure. If you're going to go that route though, like you already know you have a scoring problem that it's like, okay, so now you need to fix that. And then you had that problem with Marner. Like giving Max Domi more minutes wouldn't have been the answer, right? Or you look at just like things along the way and it's like, okay, Michelli, yes, I get the vision, right? Here's a playmaker. Maybe if you put him with better guys, he'll be good. And that's the kind of bet you should be making. But I think you needed more certainty than that, right? And you were never, if you're the Leafs, you're never replacing Mitch Marner in free agency. It doesn't happen. Players don't make it there. And we know that he technically didn't even make it there because he got traded. But I think it's like, you need to find that balance because you can't just bet on the fact like, okay, well, if you can keep games to 2-0 score, 3-1 because your defense is so good, like you can't win in this league. And I think we see teams like the Oilers, the fact that they thrive and make it to 2 straight Stanley Cup finals is proof of that, right? Like you can get by with a more chaotic approach. I think if you can have that pace and tempo, and it's like, that should have been their bread and butter. And maybe they should have leaned into it a little bit more while fixing the fringes.
But I think that like if the Oilers never win a cup, we're all going to be able to point to one reason why they didn't win a cup, and it's because they never had a goalie, right? Had the Leafs leaned more into offense, it would have been the exact same way. We would be having this exact same conversation, and it was because they never got serious about having hard depth, about a defensive identity, right? Like they leaned into the thing that they obviously needed to try to fix, and it just didn't work. Like I'm not saying that it worked. I'm saying that like they tried the approach that was the obvious approach to take, and it failed. I am extremely worried about them. I'm not saying I'm not worried about the Leafs. I'm just saying I'm not like, how could they be in this position? This is where it ends up when you fail for a whole generation of those players. Sorry, Laz.
My God, how much would we have torched them had they just run it back yet again?
Yes.
Like there's no winning for this team.
There really isn't, and that's what makes it even better. But it's like they're leaning to like, we need to collect everyone's ex-captains because we don't have leadership. It's like, I feel like it's like they either half-ass their experiments and then they change course, and it's like, well, none of it's going to work because now all of a sudden they're going to start scrambling for what, more offense. But instead they were like, we'll bring in Dakota Joshua, and here are more players of the same. Like, I just don't think that there's a strong enough vision at the top. And I think that's where it's like, okay, so you went defensive. What do you do now? You can't just do one thing in this league, right? You can't just say, okay, we're going to fix one thing and that's it. Like, you need to be like, okay, we need to be a well-rounded threat that has 3 scoring lines. Okay, what are you going to do about that?
Right.
Well, you're going to get 4th-line guys. You're going to bring in Michelli, who is a healthy scratch in Utah at the end. I have concerns. It's everywhere. And now the other part of it too, that it's getting talked about in Leafs land because everything does. Like, we know that is the Lane Lambert, Derek Lalonde of it all. I am so perplexed at Derek Lalonde because I thought he was so good with Tampa Bay as a PK coach, as a defensive coach. And yes, they've brought in other coaches and it still worked because John Cooper is very good at his job and they have really good players. But I think we saw like a little bit of a step back from Tampa when Lalonde left, goes to Detroit and is horrible at the things that he should be good at. And now Lane Lambert leaves, and I don't think everyone was like clamoring for Lambert per se, but like I think we know he could be an elite defensive coach, an elite PK coach, and he showed, hey, he can do it away from Barry Trotz. Derek Lalonde goes there. Okay, go back to your strengths. Maybe like Lambert, you struggled at being a head coach in your first go around, but you can go back to being a very good assistant coach. What is happening with that?
I don't know. Like it's always hard to parse coaching dynamics, right? All I know is the Red Wings PK, as you well know, Shayna, was a disaster last year too, right? So it's like that is not out of nowhere necessarily there. And you never knew how much of that is Bob Bugner, who was technically in charge of it in Detroit, how much of it is Lalonde. Obviously, the struggles have certainly seemed to follow him. To kind of loop this all together, though, like when I talk about this with Toronto, I'm not saying I'm much more worried about them, for example, than I am the Calgary Flames. Not in terms of making the playoffs this season, because I think the Leafs are much more likely to make the playoffs this year than the Calgary Flames, but more about the direction overall. Because the Flames, like you alluded, Laz, like they could probably trade. They're probably going to trade Nazem Kadri. They're probably going to trade Rasmus Andersson. This is now as obvious of a rebuild situation as there is maybe in the NHL. Like you're going to kickstart this, and you have two premium assets to kickstart it with. I don't know, Laz, how the Leafs get out of this, because you have a great bargain contract in John Tavares, and it's going to go to waste if they're not able to progress further than this, right? Like you have your star players, but you clearly don't have enough of really anything, and you have no assets because of the obvious, what you did, which was chasing it while you had that window. And I have no idea where Toronto goes now from this.
Yeah, it feels like Toronto is where Chicago was 8-9 years ago, where Pittsburgh was 6-7 years ago, where Tampa was maybe 2 years ago, we thought, except those teams had multiple championships to sit on. And Toronto is in that same situation where they've got some stars, but they don't have enough around it to make it into a contender year after year. And they're locked into these contracts, and they don't have any banners hanging from that era. So they have no goodwill from the fans to lean on, no good faith from the hockey world to lean on. And they're just sitting there with these onerous contracts and really, really, really amazingly good players and not enough of them and nowhere to go with them. They're in the worst kind of a limbo because, Chicago can do the kind of rebuild that they've done over the last years. This is just scorched earth, burn the Shire to the ground rebuild because they have 3 banners. And Pittsburgh eventually is going to get there. They're kind of playing with our emotions right now. But when they do, they will have the same kind of goodwill. Toronto, there's no goodwill in Toronto. There is none at all. And it's not an enviable position to be in right now.
Not as toxic of a market here necessarily in terms of I shouldn't say that about the market. Not as toxic of a discourse as in Toronto. But the Minnesota Wild are in a similar situation like that, Shayna, right? Like they're one of these teams that has stars, but they haven't really ever won, and they are off to a tough start. And I wonder what you make of them.
Yeah, it's tough because, like, again, you get into that nitpicking zone, right? When you talk about the best players in the world, and like the Austin Matthews and the William Nylanders, I'm not going to take away what they are, but they don't do it when it matters most. So if you're going to commit a ton of cap to these guys, I think you need to know that they can do it. Well, I don't want to fault Nylander because he's really good in the playoffs, but like with Matthews, right? Like you needed that if you're paying these huge star players that they're going to do it all of the time. Minnesota at least knows that. Kirill Kaprizov, I get it. You're going to say, oh, it's an overpayment. Everyone says, and they're freaking out because then you see the other contracts that come out afterwards, right? I don't have an issue with it because it is really hard to get star players. And Kirill Kaprizov is one of the best wingers in the world, and he can do it in the playoffs. So can Matt Boldy. And I think you figure it all out and you go, that is fine, right? Like it works for them. I think too, when you're a team like Minnesota, you don't have the goodwill to be like, well, look, we're Vegas, we're a perennial contender. We're not going to overpay you. Like you're Minnesota, you're barely getting out of the first round ever. You have to be like, okay, our star player, here is everything that you can want more because without you, they're completely toast. So I think they're in an okay position in that they have, Boldy, Kaprizov, and they have Brock Faber. That's a good core. And I think Spurgeon's still pretty good. And you have Zeev Boyum, who, yes, there's some defensive warts, but you see the upside there. I struggle with the fact that they had all this cap space finally opened up and what they did with it. I feel like this is a team that, you need to get a little bit younger. You need to get a little bit faster. And they're like, oh, we're just going to extend some veterans and just hand out some money this way. And it's like, you didn't do enough. You didn't thread the needle there when you had the opportunity to do so. So I think that's what really hurts them. I think the key to all of this with teams is when you recognize that you're not that good, right? Like, do you just hope for the best and push for the playoffs and get out in round 1 again? Or do you go, okay, maybe this isn't our year. We step back this year and we're going to be great. We can start reloading right now. Like, if you can recognize that immediately, stop the bleeding, fix your problems, get set for next year, you don't have these problems continuing for year after year after year, which then becomes, oh, we should retool, and just kidding, now we have to tear it down completely. So, not to be like over dramatic, but I wonder if they don't figure it out soon, do you make a decision and just start prepping for next year?
But it's so increasingly difficult to do that, to change
Yeah.
on the fly, to add. Everyone's got cap space. We talked about it earlier in the show. There are no free agents anymore. And fewer teams, the parity is so insane right now. And everyone except for the Buffalo Sabres and the Calgary Flames are in the playoff picture right now. So nobody's going to be trading any. Like, you used to be able to make trades in November. Every year there would be a bigger trade or two in November where a team's like, all right, we're screwed this year. Let's get rid of some guys, get ahead of this, get some young players back. And we don't have that anymore because everyone's in it until like mid-March at this point. So the trade deadline is going to be quiet. Summer free agency is going to be a complete dud. It's like, I'm with you. Like, the Wild they can't just stay on this course, but I'm not sure they're going to have any other options.
Now that they've signed Kaprizov, it does feel like a little more plausible just because you're not like going to lose him if that happens. But it's interesting because I feel like the last few years have been when they had that cap jam, right, from the Parise and Suter buyouts. Those were the years that I feel like you could justify being like, well, we're playing shorthanded and that's the situation here. This was supposed to be kind of the end of that. And so I think it's disappointing to see where they've come out of it. And you don't want to mess around too much with Kaprizov's prime years. You don't want to mess around too much with missing Joel Eriksson-Ek on one of the best value contracts in the NHL for my money on his best window. So they're in a tough spot for sure. The last team I want to hit, Shayna, is staying in the Central Division, the St. Louis Blues. And Jeremy Rutherford, I thought, hit it on the head with his column the other day. The Blues have proved that they are just a bad team is the headline. Do you have any reason to doubt that?
The meanest thing that JR has ever said in his life.
About anyone or anything.
I mean, honestly, right? Like, no, I don't. It's funny. A couple weeks ago, we worked on a story together, and it was like how the numbers, it's not all bad. Here's where it actually is bad. And then they won a game where, like, you know what? They need some good news. Like, that's how nice he is. He was like, no, we're going to talk about their win. We'll circle back to this, right? Like, oh God, they're so bad. Like, they're a team that, and Jim Montgomery was saying this, right? Like, the process is there. The numbers below the surface are better than the results. And he was completely right on that because they were generating more quality offense than the score sheet showed on a nightly basis. And at the time, it was, when we wrote this, I think Robert Thomas came back for one game, or like he was back for his first game. And you go, okay, well, maybe the shot quality from what we can see with public metrics doesn't capture the fact that the pre-shot movement is worse. You're down one of the worst passers in the league in Robert Thomas. Like, that could be hurting you. The defense, it's not as bad, but the goaltending's a wreck. And now it's like, okay, you know what? Maybe this roster is more flawed than we realize, right? Like, I think their offseason was questionable. I didn't like the Bolduc trade to bring in Logan Mailloux. I didn't understand it enough. I didn't like it. But it's not like that's a backbreaking deal in itself. I just felt like they didn't do enough to build off of what they did post Four Nations, like, say, Montreal did, right? Like, they took their teams and kind of, one went very quiet, one went a little bit louder. And I think the Blues could have been a lot louder this summer because they don't have a ton of, like, great goal scorers on this roster. They have good forwards. Outside of Robert Thomas, I should say. They have a lot of good forwards, but you don't look at it and go, well, they have a ton of game breakers. Okay, so you're going with the depth approach. You better bring in more scorers to make that click, right? And I just don't feel like they did it. And now the fact that both goaltenders are just god-awful, it's horrible out there in St. Louis.
And it's similar, the Wild, I think, are 5-1-1 in their last 7. Marco Rossi's out, but they've stabilized. Jesper Wallstedt is outplaying Philip Gustafsson. There's good news to be had there. The Blues have kind of stabilized a little bit. They had another like a 3-1-1 stretch. They got a point versus Philly. They lost to Vegas. It happens. But like, I feel like both those teams really needed to crash out hard. They needed to really rock bottom out. And I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to get mildly competitive again. They're going to think they can sneak in and get that first round revenue again. And they're just going to be on this treadmill of doom forever because that's the way the NHL is designed.
I think that's the key to this whole segment, right? We're not just sitting here saying like, who are the 4 worst teams in the NHL? I think that's a boring conversation. Like, these are the teams that, like, what you've seen so far, both about this year and the big picture, worries you. And I think St. Louis fits in that. I think Minnesota fits into that.
Yep. And I think with like Minnesota, at least I'm like, okay, I can see how things could turn around, right? Because of the really high end talent, because we haven't seen, Zeev Buium at his best. And now you have Matt Zuccarello back, which I think He's a great support player on that top line. He's super effective, but more importantly, he resets the depth chart, right? Like, you don't have to load up that top line with Boldy and Kaprizov every time you're in panic mode, or you don't have to have players playing out of their positions. Like, it just resets it in a way that you need, that you can now look at that team, if you're management, and go, okay, now what's missing, right? Because the entire time you had that in your back pocket, okay, we were missing that. Right? So the Blues, they get Robert Thomas back and it's like, okay, you're still bad. Maybe you're worse now. I don't know. Who's to say? Because I think the expectations are different now with Robert Thomas in the fold. I'm more worried about St. Louis than I am Minnesota somehow.
Yeah. All right, well, let's wrap there. Great stuff, Shayna. Thank you all for listening to this episode of The Athletic Hockey Show. You can subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/@TheAthleticHockeyShow to watch full episodes. How many Seans are too many? We're going to find out the answer to that question on Wednesday when Sean Gentili, Sean McIndoe, and Frankie Corrado have the next episode. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell to stay informed on the latest in the world of hockey. And join our Discord community and stay tuned here for new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.